Bonjour mes amis! Today on Stitch to Victory we are going to learn how to do a French seam. So let's roll up our sleeves, we can do this! Now the first thing we're going to do with the French seam is we're going to look at which side of the fabric is the right side and which side is the wrong side, just like you're doing with any other seam. This is the right side. It's a little difficult to see because the design on this fabric is a little pale. This is the right side, that's the wrong side. And when we're normally stitching a seam, we would put right sides together, stitch it, and we'd be done. So we've got to think a bit backwards with this. We're actually going to stitch the wrong sides together. Very counterintuitive, I know, but we're going to put those wrong sides together and we're going to do a very narrow 1/4 inch seam. Now thinking about dressmaking, you've got a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, which in French seam stitching is made up of a 1/4 and a 3/8. So we're going to stitch everything twice and it will fall into place and become logical very, very shortly. So remember, wrong sides together, so you're looking at the good side or the pretty side of the fabric facing you, and you're going to stitch 1/4 inch from the edge of the fabric. I've got my material lined up with the edge of the fabric on the 1/4 inch marking on my stitch plate, and I'm going to just stitch. I'm not going to actually worry about pinning because this is just a sample piece. It's a small piece of fabric. If you were stitching the side seams of a shirt or something like that, you probably would want to pin just to hold it in place, but today I'm going to cheat. So we'll just do a little back stitch to get going. And that's the first half done. I'm just going to clip my threads and go over to my iron and show you what we're going to do next. First thing is, you can't probably see it very easily because it's matched thread on the fabric, but I'm just going to just iron over what I've done just to relax that seam. Then I'm going to open out. Now I am looking at the wrong side of the fabric, which seems weird because I've got a nice neat seam and yet I'm looking at the wrong side. But I'm going to just fold along so that seam line, I'm going to just press it into place. I'll just roll it in like this just to make sure it's nothing nice and flat and there's nothing caught up in there. And I'm going to press that all the way down. And I'm going to do a second line of stitching. It's going to be parallel to the first, and it's going to be 3/8 of an inch, which is a centimetre, in from the clean edge of the fabric there. So it's back to the sewing machine. Right, back at the machine, and remember I am looking at the wrong side of the fabric. The right side's tucked away. So now I'm back to where I normally would be. I'm right sides together, and this is the final seam. So we'll just start with a little back stitch, 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and that 3/8 of an inch combined with the 1/4 inch that we did earlier, which is 2/8, gives us our total of 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, which is standard for dressmaking. Now you can do a French seam with any seam allowance as you like if you want to do bigger, wider seams, but I'm just going with the standard. And our seam is done. When we open this up to show the right sides of the fabric, we have a nice clean seam which when you look at the other side, we've got no raw edges showing, and that is the beauty of this seam. It is a little more work, but trust me, it's worth it. And it's particularly great if you don't have an overlocker or a serger to neaten off those edges, and you don't really want to do a zigzag. You really want to hide that raw edge and stop any fraying. So everything is hidden away inside that first, or inside that second seam allowance. That first seam allowance is hidden inside the second. It's a bit like a puzzle box, but it makes for such a nice finish. And I'm just going to press that. I'm just going to finish that off with the iron. Make it nice and clean and crisp. And there we go. This is the good side of the fabric. Turn it over to the wrong side. We've hidden those horrible raw edges. Really great when you're making shirts, blouses, because it's actually really nice against the skin. There's no tickling bits, no scratchy bits or anything. It's absolutely wonderful. Here's a shirt I made for my husband last year, and I'd already spoiled him a bit because I tend to do French seams now, and that's what he actually requests because it actually feels nicer against the skin. So you can just see the outside stitch there, the outside seam, but opening it up, look how nice and neat and clean that seam is. And I've also done it inside the sleeve seam as well. So when the sleeve is now then attached to the main body of the garment, I can actually do that side seam and sleeve seam in one go. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video on how to do a French seam, and I hope it demystified the concept for you. Next week we're going to work on a small project using the French seam, so we're putting it into practice. And remember, if you enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up and click subscribe, and also the little bell down in the bottom right hand corner. You'll get notifications every time I load a video up for you. So until next week, au revoir.